So namaskar and good morning everybody. Today 30th October 2020, we are all here on digital platform to hold our 10th Biennial International Conference, that is 10th Biennial International Conference of Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies. May I request all of you to keep your microphone in muted mode to avoid any noise commotion. So let us begin with an opening song.
शृण्वन्तु विश्वे अमृतस्य पुत्रा आये धामानि दिव्यानि तस्थो वेदाहमेतं पुरुषं महान्तं आदित्यवर्णं तमसा परस्तात् त्वमेव विदित्वाति मृत्युमेति नान्यः पन्था विद्यते अयनाय नान्यः पन्था विद्यते अयनाय नान्यः पन्था विद्यते अयनाय शृणु शृणु सुरलोकबासी অমৃতেরো আছো সন্তান জানিয়াছি সে অবিনাশী জ্যোতির্ময় পুরুষ মহান তপন বরণ তিনি আধারের পারে যিনি তাহারে জানিয়া জীব মরণ এড়ায় নিস্তার লাভের আর নাহি রে উপায়।
May I now request Honorable Professor Jayanta Kumar Roy to preside. Professor Roy is the National Research Professor, Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India, and he is also Honorary Professor of History Department, University of Calcutta. So, over to Professor Jayanta Kumar Roy, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Ghosh. Friends from far and near, ladies and gentlemen, it is a matter of pride and honor for me to be asked to preside over the 10th biennial session of Indian Association for Asia and Pacific Studies, shortly known as IAAPS. I feel proud that a number of my distinguished students, led by Professor Lipi Ghosh, have played a great part in organizing this unique conference. I'm also feeling honored that I'm presiding over a session where a number of eminent academics and distinguished diplomats have found time to speak. I now call upon Professor Sarvani Gupta to present the welcome address.
It is an honor for me today to welcome you all, delegates, guests, and participants to the 10th Biennial Conference 2020 of the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies, being held virtually today today and tomorrow. YAPS has always been committed to provide a platform to scholars working on various aspects of history, economy, politics, society, and culture of Asia Pacific region. At the crucial moment of contemporary history today, the present conference aims to look at the challenges and opportunities in contemporary India and Southeast Asia relations through the Look East, Act East prism. On behalf of the President of YAPS, Professor Parul Pandya, Vice President Professor Lipi Ghosh, and the Executive Committee, I welcome you all to the deliberations today. Professor Joyanta Kumar Ray, eminent historian of Indian foreign policy, who is chairing the inaugural session today. Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, who will give the keynote address. Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, who will deliver the inaugural address. Professor Shonali Chakraborty Banerjee, EC members of YAPS. Dr. James Gomez, Regional Director of Asia Center. Vice Chancellor, Calcutta University, and Ambassador Vishwas Vidhu, who are special guests. And Dr. James Gomez, Regional Director of Asia Center, are collaborator for this conference. Welcome to you all. A warm welcome to the chairpersons of the academic sessions, Professor Parul Pandya, Dharr of Delhi University, Professor Rajagopal Dharcho Chakraborty, Calcutta University, Professor Shushmita Mukherjee, EC members of YAPS, Dr. Ochinto Dotto, Dr. Shushmita Mukherjee, EC members of YAPS, Dr. Onusha Bosurai Chaudhary, Treasurer YAPS, Dr. James Gomez, Regional Director of Asia Center, and Dr. Robin Ramacharan, Executive Director of Asia Center. A very warm welcome. I also welcome speakers of the sessions who are joining us from different parts of the country. As always, selected papers will be published in a volume Perspectives Asia Pacific in the next conference. As always, selected papers will be published in a volume Perspectives Asia Pacific in the next conference.
I now request Professor Lipi Ghosh to offer the videos of past keynote speakers in collaboration with Professor Sarbani Gupta.
Thank you, sir. In the beginning, it's my pleasure to say a few words about our history, that is, history of Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies. So let me begin with that formal address. Respected Professor Joyanta Kumar Ray, Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakraborty, Professor Shonali Chakraborty Banerjee, Honorable Vice Chancellor, University of Calcutta, uh, Dr. James Gomes, Dr. Robin Ramcharan, Pro Vice Chancellor from Dagon University, Myanmar, Dr. Nu E, uh, Professor Parthu Ghosh, our Honorable President YAPS, and other distinguished participants, fellow colleagues, friends, and beloved students. It is a great day for Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies, which being founded on 16th October 1998 completes 22 years of its journey as one of the most significant government recognized organization on Asian and Pacific studies. It is a great day in my personal life too, as being the founder secretary, I also crossed a journey with YAPS with many joys and some nots indeed. In 1998, when the organization was founded, it started with only 5 members. Later, with a span of 3 years, YAPS could bring into its fold about 200 members gradually. And subsequently, at the end of 22 years, now we have members close to a number of around 1,000. Members of IAAPS are scattered all over India, touching almost every states of India from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and Rajasthan to Northeast India. Internationally also, our members and associates are spread over South and Southeast Asia and some Western countries. The Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies actually is a non-profit, non-government organization taking interest into different kinds of academic endeavors, and it works on Asia and Pacific regions. The association promotes research and undertaking of different region of Asia and Pacific area to carry out social science oriented studies, as well as we try to present our work to the public forums in form of conferences and lectures. And sometimes there are also some training platform, especially training of language courses like Thai and Burmese. And every 2 years, we hold our international conferences where usually our members present their academic researches. And it is a good platform for young professionals as well as for young scholars. Starting from the year 2000, we organized 9 international conferences in states like West Bengal, Orissa, Madhya Pradesh, Sikkim, Assam, Karnataka, and Punjab. In 2020, we had a plan to take our conference to this 10th Biennial conference to Southeast Asia, that is to Thailand. And Asia Center Bangkok came forward to collaborate with us. But unfortunately, as we all know, worldwide pandemic has disrupted our plans. But due to many reasons, we didn't want to lose a year. And so our executive committee unanimously opted for this challenge, that is to hold 10th Biennial Conference on digital platform. Our president says a very important sentence, that is, we are holding it nowhere, we are holding it everywhere. You will listen to his talk also after some time. So, looking back at 22 years, it makes me remind several feelings of myself to share with you all. It has been just like nurturing a baby from its birth to the age of 22 years. The path was not always smooth indeed, but it was miraculous to have support and help from different well wishers who contributed solidly to the growth of the child. Today, I remember with heavy heart departs of some beloved colleagues who actively work for this association. They are Professor Arun Dashgupta, Dr. Rajarshi Bosu, Dr. D.N. Bokshi, Professor Bimal Chaudhuri, Professor Purushottam Bhattacharya, and last but not least, my father, late Enel Ghosh. All of them, in whatever capacity it might be, helped in supporting the cause of the organization. I am fortunate to have their blessings, which continuously generated a great source of power to work for the organization. IAAPS is still officially located in house of my parents, without whose active cooperation we could not have run it so long. However, I am happy to declare that IAAPS now very soon will house a new office address as we could buy an office space. I must say my sincere gratitude to all the universities and organizations like Sambalpur University, GRG University, Tejpur University, Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Creed Chandigarh, Sikkim University, Vishwabharati, and University of Kolkata. Finally, I end up with a big hope that IAAPS in the future days to come will continue to work in a longer scale and will successfully reach out to different corners of the globe where we are yet to reach. I, as present Vice President of IAAPS, must say my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Partho Ghosh, our beloved President of the organization, who is actually a very big source of inspiration to all of us. And also, I must say my gratitude and thanks to each and every executive committee members who always show their solidarity to work together. Currently, IAAPS is in hand of our very efficient secretary, Professor Dr. Sharbani Guptu. Joint Secretary is Dr. Nandini Bhattacharya, and Treasurer is Dr. Anushwa Bosurai Chaudhuri. So, with big hope This 10th Biennial International Conference will subsequently turn to 25th Biennial International Conference. I end up my speech here. Now, we will present before you all the message of our 8 past keynote speakers. We have recorded their messages or we have video clippings. Our secretary, Professor Sharbani Guptu, has nicely anchored the session. So, please enjoy it. Thank you.
To mark the special occasion of the 10th Biennial Conference of the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies, the Founder Secretary Professor Lipi Ghosh, our present Vice President, had the grand plan to invite all the previous erudite scholars who had honored us with keynote addresses at the inaugural sessions of the past 9 conferences to join us at our 10th as well as special guests. However, the pandemic put a damper on the plans to celebrate the 10th year in Bangkok. Professor Ghosh then decided to request all the senior scholars to record their message for us, which we have put together in a special video for you. The first biennial conference of the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies was held in 2002 at Kolkata, where Professor Arun Dasgupta gave the keynote address. Unfortunately, Professor Dasgupta is no longer in our midst, and we pay respect to him today for his support for the fledgling organization 18 years back. The second biennial international conference was held in 2004 at Sambalpur, Orissa, where Professor Harman Kulke gave the keynote address. We are very pleased today that Professor Kulke has sent his message in a short video.
I'm very thankful to Professor Lipi Ghosh for inviting me to contribute a message to the 10th Biennial Conference of the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies. It gives me a great pleasure to remember my participation in the second Biennial Conference at Sambalpur in 2004. The volume is over here. I still have it and I like it very much. And thankful for the great honor to deliver its keynote with the subject Indian Colonies, Indianization or Cultural Convergence. Reflections on the changing image of India's role in Southeast Asia. It offered me the first opportunity to present ideas about the so-called Indianization of Southeast Asia to an Indian scholarly community and audience after having contributed it for the first time to a conference of the Orientalist Society at Leiden University in 1989. I'm therefore asked for your understanding to refer to my Sambalpur keynote as it touches still relevant aspects of your Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies. Since the 19th century, India's relationship with Asia and Southeast Asia in particular was likewise enriched and burdened by its cultural heritage in this region. The discovery and scholarly exploration of its Sanskritized literary traditions and of its architectural monuments like the Borobudur and in Java and Angkor doubtlessly proved of India's early and medieval cultural dominance in Southeast Asia. But in the course of Hindu nationalism and in the period of late colonialism, misleading concepts like Greater India and Hindu colonies in Southeast Asia emerged. In 1926, the Greater India Society was established in Calcutta, and already in the following year, the first volume of a series of monographs, Hindu Colonies in Far East, was published by the late doyen of Indian historians, Professor R.C. Majumdar. And in a special lecture in 1940, he he pointed out, I'm quoting, numerous Hindu states rose and flourished during a period of more than 1,000 years. The Hindu colonies brought with them the whole framework of their culture and civilization, and this was transplanted in its entirety among people who had not yet emerged from their primitive barbarism. Such misleading, and in fact historically wrong nationalistic judgments led since the 80s and 90s in a series of important international conferences to a revision of the existing theories of the so-called Indianization. It was caused primarily by the results of the archaeological research in the preceding decades. They depicted a high degree of early urbanization and early state formation in mainland and maritime Southeast Asia around the beginning of the Common Era, about 1 or 2 centuries before the proposed Indian influence are known to have become evident. It is in these prehistoric and proto-historic paramouncies that much of the dynamism of the so-called Indianization should be thought. In my keynote at Sambalpur, I took up these archaeological discoveries as part of my convergence theory in order to explain the high congruence of nearly simultaneous processes of early urbanization and state formation in coastal eastern and southern India under very similar socio-political circumstances in Southeast Asia. The attractive ideal for the clan leaders and the early kings of Southeast Asia emerged was not the imperial state of the Guptas, but smaller kingdoms that emerged in the 4th and 5th century at the eastern coast of India. The rise of the Rajas in the coastal regions of Deccan and in South India, the important role of Brahmin advisors invited from North India to South India, and the construction of the first Hindu temples as new symbols of royal legitimation have very clear parallels in Southeast Asia. Whereas Indianization presumes cultural superiority and political pressure as the major cause of the dissemination of Indian culture in Southeast Asia, the convergence hypothesis postulates social nuance and conscious socio-cultural rapprochement as the promoter of the so-called Indianization. I wish the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies all success to promote India's and Southeast Asia's cultural connectivity of the past as a contemporary transnational heritage and to preserve it in the future in an age of increasing tensions in the Indo-Pacific regions. Thank you very much.
The 3rd IAAPS Biennial International Conference was held in 2006 at Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh, where Professor Wang Gungu gave the keynote address. It is our honor that despite serious preoccupations and personal tragedy, Professor Gungu has sent a message for us, which I read out now. Lippy, forgive me. My wife Margaret passed away and I am in mourning and in no condition to prepare a video or an audio clipping for you. May I instead ask you to record my congratulations to you and the association for its 10th Biennial Conference and wish it every success. I also wish to place on record my appreciation of your dedicated efforts to support the association all these years. Warmest regards, Gungu. The 4th IAAPS Biennial International Conference was held in 2008 at Shantiniketan, where Professor Anthony Reed gave the keynote address. At our request, Professor Reed sent the following message. Hi Lipi, it was good to hear from you and learn of all your achievements. It's great that you have kept the IAAPS going all this time. I wish you well. Best wishes, Tony. The 5th Biennial International Conference was held in 2010 at Gangtok, Sikkim, where Ambassador Kesavapani gave the keynote address. Here follows his video message to us.
Professor Lipi Ghosh, my good friend and colleague for a very long time. There are so many titles, so many awards. It will take me all the 5 minutes given to me to read them out. So, to the rest of the participants who are participating in this webinar, I would say thank you and for this opportunity to speak to all of you. 10 years ago, Professor Lipi Ghosh gave me the unique pleasure of speaking at the 5th centennial of this conference, and it took me to Gangtok, Sikkim, a place I had never gone to before. So that was a unique experience. Now, 10 years later, we are gathered here to talk about India and Southeast Asia, particularly in the part of the region which is not very frequently touched upon. Within these 10 years, a lot of changes have occurred, and the world is a different place from what it was 10 years ago. We have, for the first time in history, two Asian engines of growth, China and India, at the same time. Previously, when one was growing, the other was not. But today, we have this unique phenomenon of both of them driving the Asian continent and also the rest of the world. At the same time, we have other powers like the United States trying to retain its place in the world because of the changing dynamics of trade, geopolitics, and other factors. So, where does this concept of India and Southeast Asia fit in? India, within the last 5 years, 5 to 10 years, has become the third largest economic power, and also has gained its own place in the world. ASEAN, on the other hand, has managed to keep to its centrality in the region, so that it is also a grouping that is looked upon as a force in its own right. Now, the last 6 months have changed the world dramatically by COVID-19. The world has changed beyond recognition. There's no longer such a thing as China, India, or Europe, or even the United States. We are all gripped by this virus, which has brought in unimaginable changes, whether it is in trade, whether it is in aviation, whether it's in tourism, whether it is in even education, because people are not able to move around as they used to do. So, what do we do? What do we do in this rapid change when everything is being overwhelmed? That is why this conference is very important, very critical, coming at this time, to find solutions to a rapidly changing world where India and Southeast Asia have to survive, have to move forward together if they are not going to be overwhelmed by these changes. So let me once again thank Professor Lipi Ghosh for having invited me for this very important, very significant conference, and I wish the participants
The 6th Biennial Conference of the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies was held in 2012 in Kolkata, where Professor Sugato Bose gave the keynote address. At our request, he sent a message which I am going to read out to you now. The whole of Asia, Binoy Kumar Sarkar wrote during his visit to China in 1915, must become the domain of inquiry for Indian historians. A weighty colonial legacy prevented the realization of that ambition for a very long time in the formal teaching curricula and research agendas of our colleges and universities. That is where learned associations of scholars stepped in to fill a lacuna in the study of our neighboring regions. Following in the tradition of that mode of scholarship, IAAPS has played a commendable role in the 21st century to disseminate a deeper understanding of Asian connections, economic, cultural, and political. In 2012, it was my privilege to deliver the keynote lecture at the 6th Biennial Conference of this association. I began by reminding the audience of Rabindranath Tagore's voyage to Southeast Asia in 1927, which the poet described as retracing the footprints of India's entry into the universal. In 2006, I had published my book, 100 Horizons, in which I had creatively trespassed across colonial and national borders, as well as rigid area studies boundaries, to write about the specialized flows of capital and labor, skills and services, ideas and culture that linked the Indian Ocean inter-regional arena. In the last decade and half, many younger scholars have advanced the study of Asia, the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific as connected zones. I send warmest congratulations to all the scholars affiliated with IAAPS on their accomplishments and extend my very best wishes for the success of the association's 10th Biennial Conference being held remotely amidst the challenges of a global pandemic. May everyone remain healthy and enrich the world of scholarship in these unusual times.
So, you have listened to our past. Now there is a recess. Small recess means there is a gap before we go to the second part, that is talk of our 7th, 8th, and 9th keynotes addresses. So may I request our member Shutirtho Bedago to sing a song for us. Shutirtho, please.
Namaskar, good morning, and warm welcome to all of our distinguished guests and participants of the 10th Biennial International Conference organized by Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies, Kolkata. I would like to thank Professor Lipi Ghosh for giving me this opportunity to present a song before all of you. I'm going to present a Rabindra Sangit, a song written and composed by Rabindranath Tagore. I am going to present this song to commemorate the historical and cultural linkages between India and Southeast Asia, which has been lasting for several years. And I hope that in near future, the bond will increase further and there will be freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and freedom of exchange in this realm of linkages and association between India and Southeast Asia. This particular song actually tells about association and freedom in association. It says, step out of yourself, the universe will respond within. These swelling waves will break into a dance within, and the soul will be moved. Oh, vast, take your seat within the sky, adorned with the golden dust of the dawn light. Spread your wings in space abundant, finding freedom amidst all. আপন হতে বাহির হয়ে বাইরে দাঁড়া, বুকের মাঝে বিশ্ব লোকের পাবে সাড়া। আপন হতে বাহির হয়ে বাইরে দাঁড়া, বুকের মাঝে বিশ্ব লোকের পাবে সাড়া। আপন হতে বাহির হয়ে বাইরে দাঁড়া। এই যে বিপুল ঢেউ লেগেছে তোর মাঝেতে, উঠুক নেচে নেচে। এই যে বিপুল ঢেউ লেগেছে তোর মাঝেতে, উঠুক নেচে নেচে। সকল পরাণ দিক না নাড়া, বাইরে দাঁড়া, বাইরে দাঁড়া। আপন হতে বাহির হয়ে বাইরে দাঁড়া, বুকের মাঝে বিশ্ব লোকের পাবে সাড়া। আপন হতে বাহির হয়ে বাইরে দাঁড়া। উষ্ণা ভ্রমর এই নীলিমায় আসন লয়ে, অরুণ আলোর স্বর্ণ রেণু মাখা হয়ে। বসনা ভ্রমর এই নীলিমায় আসন লয়ে, যেখানেতে অগাধ ছুটি মেল শেথা তোর ডানা দুটি দুটি। যেখানেতে অগাধ ছুটি মেল শেথা তোর ডানা দুটি দুটি। সবার মাঝে পাবি ছাড়া, বাইরে দাঁড়া, বাইরে দাঁড়া। আপন হতে বাহির হয়ে বাইরে দাঁড়া, বুকের মাঝে বিশ্ব লোকের পাবি সাড়া। আপন হতে বাহির হয়ে বাইরে দাঁড়া।
So now we will listen to the second part of these video clippings, and those are definitely better in production. I hope you can enjoy better. And there you will hear our 7th, 8th, and 9th biennial keynote speakers.
The 7th Biennial International Conference was held at Tejpur, Assam in 2014, where Professor Prosenjit Dwara delivered the keynote address. We have received a short video clipping from him, which we will play for you now.
Good afternoon, everybody. And it is afternoon here in Durham, North Carolina, in the United States, from where I'm speaking. My name is Prosenjit Dwara, and I'm a historian of China and also a professor of East Asian Studies at Duke University, which is in North Carolina, which is in Durham. My heartiest congratulations to the IAAPS, the Indian Association of Asian Pacific Studies, on the 10th Biennale. I have been involved in events involving the IAAPS in Kolkata, in Bangkok, and but most memorable of all, I think, was the keynote that I gave in my own home state of Assam in Tezpur University. I believe it was the 7th Biennale in 2014, I think it was. Now, of course, the eastern part of India and the southern part of India has long had historical relationships with Southeast Asia, East Asia, and the eastern regions of Asia. And Kolkata, I think, is a very fitting place to develop the studies of Eastern Asia and Southeast Asia. For instance, it was one of the earliest places to study, to research and study, as we know from the journal Greater India, which was, of course, developed in Kolkata, and it was devoted to researching Indian influences in Southeast Asia and elsewhere. So it provided a very important foundation, I think, for the scholarly study of East Asia and Southeast Asia. But even more important than the Greater India Journal and its researchers was, of course, the role of Rabindranath Tagore, who was whose efforts were not for a greater India, but for a greater Asia. And all of his activities and energy, which he devoted to developing this relationship and to the institution or in Shantiniketan, was, of course, magnificent and in some ways remains unsurpassed. But it was a lonely enterprise, and for many decades later, it has not been, it has been neglected to some extent, I believe. At any rate, it is fitting that IAAPS is, as a scholarly and a civic organization, is carrying on that important role. Now, and part of the neglect, of course, of institutions like Shantiniketan was that for many decades, the government of India after independence was not particularly interested, of course, in East and Southeast Asia. But of course, since the 1990s, we've had a Look East policy, and now we have an Act East policy, which is the theme of your conference, I believe. And this is, of course, a much better development. But I believe that the whole Indian relationship with this region east of it is still faces many obstacles and shortcomings. One of these, and now I speak as the immediate past president of the American Association for Asian Studies. One of the shortcomings, as I believe, is that there is a lack of good scholarly, non-governmental associations able to create not only strong scholarship, but also academic and people-to-people relations with this part of the world, with the East Asia and the Southeast Asian region, or the Asia and Pacific region. I had actually initiated some of the first AAS in Asia conferences when I was in Singapore, and despite many difficulties that we've had, mainly due to international tensions and diplomatic problems and so on, people from different parts of Asia have insisted on continuing and building this relationship, and the conference is seen as a great venue for it. So for these reasons, I think it remains very important that IAAPS continue to pursue its goal and its mission, uh, uh, no matter what happens. Okay, now finally, I want to make a special statement of gratitude to Professor Lipi Ghosh. As far as I'm concerned, she has been my main contact with IAAPS, and it has certainly been the driving force behind it. Of course, her colleagues, the staff, and all the students, and all of you participants, she could not have done it without your support. So we must also thank and congratulate you. So congratulations, and I wish you a long and productive career in your mission. Thank you.
The 8th Biennial International Conference of the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies was held at Manipal, Karnataka in 2016, where Professor Ken Masujima delivered the keynote address. He has very kindly sent us a short video message which we will play for you now.
Hello, I am Ken Masujima from Japan. To the delegates of the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies, congratulations for the 50th anniversary of the association. Nobody imagined that the world was going to be like this before the outbreak of the pandemic. Many things changed, but most seem to agree that the pandemic basically did not fundamentally alter the world. It rather reinforced the tendency which already existed. Danny Roderick and Jared Diamond both assert this point. Indeed, the pandemic accelerated or delayed certain developments of a society, but did not fundamentally create new tendency. Two such changes stand out since 2016. When I talked about the coming regional order in Asia 4 years ago, the order of the day was the rising powers, where large GDP with high income disparities, and with the case of China, high trade dependence seemed to be a common trait. Now China's trade dependence has been decreasing since then, and in the midst of a trade war with the US, it is bound to further go down. The pandemic further accelerates this process of lessening of trade importance and the increase of domestic market for China, since international trade decreased dramatically with the pandemic. Where will China go from here? This is a question that we need to ask to see the future of Asia. Another change from 4 years ago is the regional framework of Asia. Your association carries the name of Asia and the Pacific, which corresponded to the regional framework created at the beginning of the 1990s, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC. Today, increasingly though, we refer to the Indo-Pacific. This is a strange naming, since Asia, the very heart of the geographical location, is not mentioned. Of course, there are geopolitical reasons for this, and the rising geopolitical significance of India is no stranger to this change. With globalization and geopolitical competition, it is getting clearer that India and South Asia in general are part of a geographic entity, whatever its appellation. More than before, there are demands for tackling common problems of the Indo-Pacific region together. I am sure that the Association for Asian and Pacific Studies will play an important part in this collective endeavor in the changing regional order. I wish you continued success and healthy life for every and each member of the association. For my part, I would like to visit India again to admire the beautiful Taj Mahal. Thank you very much, and see you again soon.
The 9th Biennial International Conference of IAAPS was held at Chandigarh, Punjab, where Professor Rahul Mukherjee gave the keynote address. We were very happy to receive a video message from him, which we will play for you now.
Greetings from Heidelberg. I cannot express the immense joy that I had when I visited the 9th Biennial for the keynote address. At the 9th Biennial, there were people from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. all of whom enjoyed discussion, debate, an air of freedom, and the wonderful weather of Chandigarh. Today, when we speak in 2020, India seems to have traversed a path from what the situation was in 2019. In 2019, I had stressed that the India model is a model of democracy which works with gradualism. Gradualism is not stealth. India does not achieve by hiding things from others. Gradualism is a model where you try to build a consensus around a certain set of policy ideas. This consensus takes time, and over a period of time, this consensus builds a momentum, and sometimes it reaches a tipping point, a point from where the nature of change is so dramatic that you cannot even understand that the past was so different from the present. And it is this kind of change, I had argued, that has produced India's rapid economic reforms as well as its politics of welfare. But when we come to the situation in 2020, and especially after the 2019 elections, one comes to understand that there is a deliberate attempt to change the nature of governance. Rather than deliberation and gradualism, the state is trying to say that we want to quickly change things. So, if we have to abolish Article 370, we must quickly do this without much deliberation. If we have to manage the COVID situation, we must quickly impose a lockdown. If we have to help farmers, then we must quickly introduce 3 bills and have them passed without getting them through the standing committees or without even trying to listen to some of the parliamentarians who said that we should have a proper vote. And of course, parliamentary standing committees are of no significance. I will just give you one example to drive home the point. Sitting here from Germany, it is easy for me to pontificate. I know that the conditions in India are far worse than the conditions that we face in Germany. And I would like to draw your attention to a paper that will be published in the October issue of the Journal of Democracy. In that paper, I have reflected and I have tried to argue that deliberation with opposition parties, deliberation with economists, deliberation with health officials, and deliberation with medical doctors was largely ignored during, before, and after the period of the lockdown. Why? We can clearly see this because there was no serious debate on the lockdown of March 24, 2020 within the Parliament of India. This is an even bigger scandal than passing the 3 farm bills that have been passed without any deliberations. And there were lessons to be learned from Kerala. The Indian Council of Medical Research had published papers which had very sophisticated ideas about community-based lockdowns. Economists were saying that you must put more and more and more resources into the hands of the poor at the time of the lockdown. If there was ever a good reason to put money in the hands of the poor, it was now. And what did the center do to the states? Health, as you know, is a subject that is governed by the provincial state governments in India. At the very time when the state governments needed the money, the center said that it cannot afford to pay the compensation of the GST tax. Not only that, the center would not be willing to borrow this money and give it to the states. Rather, it encouraged the states to go to market creditors and borrow the money at market rates. So this is truly a time when the idea of India is being debated. We have an interview that Farooq Abdullah has given, where he has suggested that after the abolition of Article 370, India has lost the hearts of Kashmiris. Only recently were we told by the Chief Minister of Punjab, Captain Amrinder Singh, that Punjab farmers are very, very angry because of the way in which these bills were passed. And there is bipartisan consensus in Punjab, because even the opposition Akali Dal had a minister in the government and she resigned. And what did Captain Amrinder Singh say? Captain Amrinder Singh said that Punjab is a country that fights for the security of India. Pakistan is a neighboring state. And if the Pakistan military wants to deal a heavy blow through its inter-services intelligence, the best time is when Punjabis, Sikhs and farmers are disenchanted. So indeed, like many other economists and scholars, I don't think that the idea of India is completely lost. The question is that we have to debate and resurrect that idea of India and try to find out reason among politicians in the opposition, among politicians even within the BJP. Because the safety, security and the sanctity of India is of much, much greater significance than India alone. Because India stands as a beacon house in the democratic world. India is a country that has emerged from a civilization that many people thought could not survive as a nation, with a lot of diversity. India makes a huge impact on its neighbors. It also makes a huge impact on Southeast Asia. At a very time when the world is struggling to fight and keep democratic values alive, at the very time when global economic interdependence requires India, at the very time when a country as big as India also possesses substantial military power to protect certain values, I believe that upholding the idea of India is very, very important. And I do hope that this conference will dedicate itself to this task and hopefully inspire some people to think, cogitate, debate, and if necessary, oppose those very forms of governance that are detrimental for India, for Asia, and for the world. Thank you for your patience, and I wish you all the very best.
So I now request that the address of the President, IAAPS, Professor Partho S. Ghosh, may be presented.
Due to some technical problem, our president couldn't join online, but he has sent a video message for us.
Good morning. Professor Jayanta Kumar Roy, actually my dear Jayantuda. Professor Sonali Chakravarti Banerjee, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University of Calcutta, Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, our esteemed keynote speaker, Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay, Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakraborty, Professor Manmohini Kaul, Professor Sarbani Guptu, Secretary of the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies, popularly known as IAAPS, Professor Lipi Ghosh, the Secretary for this conference, and the virtual turbine of our organization, friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the organizing committee of IAAPS and on my own behalf, I extend a very warm welcome to all the web participants to this 10th Biennial International Conference of IAAPS. We are living in the days of the COVID pandemic. This has made everything look so different this year. From the desk of the IAAPS president, when I welcome our delegates every second year to our biennial conference, I ritualistically welcome them to the city where the conference is held. Thanks to the pandemic this year, and thanks to the experience of web-based platforms, we are holding it nowhere and everywhere in the world. What can be a more globalized experience than this? Naturally, instead of being a dampener, it is an additional boost to our spirit. I extend therefore my hearty welcome to all the 100 registered and some more potential participants wherever in the world you are located. More than a year ago, when we were working out the theme for this conference, what appeared most important to us was the growing participation of India in the economy and trade of the critical region of the Asia Pacific. We zeroed in therefore on the title From Look East to Act East. The intervention of COVID on the one hand and the increasing tensions in the Indo-Chinese and the Sino-American relations on the other made the situation look quite different in subsequent months. It is a credit to our organizing team that they could adequately adjust themselves to the changed circumstances so as to allow as many papers as possible to address these recent developments without, of course, compromising the larger questions and issues which have a longer shelf life than the contemporary events. Three interrelated issues have caught our imagination. They are 1. The border tensions between India and China. 2. The growing consensus within the United States about the challenge they face from China in the region and beyond. And perhaps most importantly, 3. How to prepare ourselves for a post-pandemic world full of surprises. I expect each of these issues to figure in our discussions over the coming days. Since the American presidential election is just a few days away, some revisions in the papers will surely be required subsequently to adapt to the outcome of the event. For whatever one may say about the fading glamour of America as a superpower, it will continue to matter the most. I am quite sure that during our discussions, a few things will figure very prominently, such as the future of the Quad, the so-called partnership between the 4 prominent democracies that have massive stakes in the stability of the region. These 4 democracies are Australia, India, Japan, and the United States. Simultaneously, how would Japan possibly respond to this development? So many things are actually unknown and, to put it philosophically, unknowable. Let me end on that note. That is, history is essentially philosophy of another kind. Sometime in the mid-80s, I attended a talk by the London University historian Professor Kirti Chaudhary at Heidelberg University. What he said left a deep imprint upon me. He argued that history had its course, its own philosophy, not necessarily fathomed by the decision makers of the day. By the early 20th century, many thoughtful people in Britain had understood that the end of their empire was in the making, but they could barely arrest the process. In his memoirs, Present at the Creation, published in 1969, the US Secretary of State Dean Acheson had downright confessed that everything that was within America's power was deployed to prevent China from going communist in 1949. But the Americans failed, and failed miserably at that. Well, I once again warmly welcome you to our web conference and wish you great brainstorming, no matter how dispersed those brains may be. Adjusting to a difficult time, I should say, thankfully, the separation is only physical, not cerebral. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Partha. I now request Dr. James Gomez to present his address.
Thank you very much. Greetings to one and all from Singapore. I want to congratulate IAAPS for coming so far and so brilliantly within this COVID time and to go digital. Fantastic. Asia Center somehow was hoping, we could co-host the conference in Southeast Asia in Bangkok, but I think we can still work on it post-COVID, so keeping things positive. Special thanks to Professor Lipi Ghosh, with whom Asia Center collaborates, recognizing also Vice Chancellor of University of Calcutta and all other dignitaries and esteemed academic and scholarly colleagues here. Asia Center specializes in issues related to Southeast Asia. We have developed a certain fluency on some of the issues on the ground. We take a very contemporary approach, and engaging with India as part of the India-Southeast Asia nexus is of special interest to us. And we have in the last few years connected with IAAPS, University of Calcutta, as well as other university in the larger Kolkata region, including ORF. And we hope to continue to do so. But what I wanted to kind of just put out there in terms of framing of the conversations in the next couple of days is really the following observation. I feel that the current discourse on how we approach India-ASEAN relationship is best reflected whether such a relationship can progress independently of India-China rivalry. I think currently the approach being taken towards India-Southeast Asian relationship is a very statist, romanticized, historical, and academic approach. And I think that is not the way forward for India's engagement with Southeast Asia. I think what we need is a people-to-people, a values-based, contemporary, and action-oriented approach for growing the India-Southeast Asian relationship, building on the previous approach. So I think we need to make a turn here. I'll just then signpost three things that we all collectively can keep in mind as we forward the discussions the next 2 days. The first one, of course, to flag the India-US foreign policy, geopolitical dance. Whatever the outcome of that may be, it's good that we are reminded that the elite of Southeast Asia is still very much managed and led by the Chinese diaspora elite sitting in various, political, economic, and other elite apexes of the different Southeast Asian countries. And how would one turn the pivot here? In this regard, I will also make a remark about the Indian embassies and their operations in Southeast Asia. They still reflect a very old statist approach. Their partners on the ground tend to be traditional institutions, and you do not get a sense that it's moving forward people to people in a contemporary digital interface. The second remark I'll make is, and many colleagues have raised this issue here, is the impact of COVID-19 and what's really happening on the ground. I think India's engagement with Southeast Asia was seen favorably, partly because of the spending dollar through tourism, and that supported, and Southeast Asia was pivoting towards India as the next wave of tourism market, following on from China, and also to diversify. So given the COVID travel situation that has impacted, we often talk about hotel rooms, travel agencies, flights, and all of that, but we also forget restaurants, Indian restaurants that largely serve not so much the local community as such as a broad range of tourists, whether it's vegetarian or non-vegetarian food, and a lot of them are not doing very well. And my last remark is really about business dimension of workers. We had in the region both regularized, formally approved work permit, work pass holders from India who may work from, in professional categories, in the banks, to academia, to IT, or even as maids. There is a big pushback as countries in Southeast Asia want to rely less on foreign staff. So that's also something that we need to keep in mind in terms of COVID-19. And India also is a sender of a fair amount of undocumented, unregistered migrant workers. And that also has a bearing in some of the receiving countries from such as Thailand and Malaysia. So I will. So these are just some of the thoughts in which, by wrapping up, just to say that in addition to the way we have been looking at India-Southeast Asian relationship, I think a welcome layer would be one to add people to people, values-based, contemporary, and an action-oriented approach. Because the reality is these days, people no longer sit in front of a camera with bookshelves at the back, but really they sit in front of a camera with green screen digital imagery, which I see many of you are already using, including senior colleague Rajiv Bhatia. So I will leave there and hope we'll put a little bit of spice to the discussions going forward. Thank you very much, and once again to the organizer, very happy to be part of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. James Gomez, for valuable comments. I now request the guest of honor, Professor Sonali Chakraborty Banerjee, Vice Chancellor, University of Calcutta, who is also my boss, to deliver her address.
Our Vice Chancellor Madam is also engaged in an urgent meeting, but we have her video clippings.
Dear friends and colleagues, I feel greatly honored to be invited here as guest of honor in the 10th Biennial International Conference of the Indian Association for Asian and Pacific Studies. I am delighted to see that the speakers will discuss a range of themes, from ancient connections between India and Southeast Asia to contemporary issues in international relations and economic exchange. To strengthen India's ties with her neighbors, we need to focus both on the deep past that shapes our shared civilizational heritage, as well as on intensifying contemporary political, commercial, and cultural exchanges. Hence, I am very glad that this program aims at studying both these strands. India's connections with Southeast Asia stretch more than 2 millennia. Sheldon Pollock speaks of the expansive Sanskrit cosmopolis that stretched from the borders of Central Asia to Vietnam. The epics Ramayana and Mahabharata, the religious and philosophical heritage of Buddhism, the aesthetic grandeur of temples and monasteries, all these connect India intimately to Southeast Asia until today. In the second millennium CE, Islamicate cultural and commercial links added new depths to this Indian Ocean heritage. The works of the Bengali poets at the Arakan court, Alaol and Daulat Qazi, bear witness to the way that Indian Ocean maritime connections stimulated transcultural blossoming. In the 20th century, figures like Rabindranath Tagore, Suniti Kumar Chatterjee, and Shukarno rediscovered and revitalized these links in order to fight against Western imperial hegemony. Rabindranath's poems on Bali and Thailand, as well as the Cambodian monarch king Narodam Sihanak's movies, exemplify how these civilizational bonds between India and Southeast Asia stimulated national revival across the Indian Ocean. This sparked colonized peoples to take pride in their indigenous heritage and shake off colonial heteronomy. In the poem Asia, written by the poet Nirendranath Chakraborty in 1947, the poet imagines the independence of peoples across the Indian Ocean world, from India and Ceylon to Burma, Indochina, and Indonesia. He chants and proclaims the hope, He Asia, Ratri Shesh, Bhasho Apoman Shojja Charo. O Asia, the night is at an end. Leave the bed of ashen humiliation. For Asia to awaken, we need to ally together, emphasizing the ancient and ever new bonds that weave us together as brothers and sisters. I hope that this conference will contribute towards that endeavor. Thank you.
I now request Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia to present the keynote address. And fortunately, this will not be in a video form.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me. Professor Jayanta Kumar Ray, esteemed chair of the inaugural session of this wonderful conference, very important conference, and national research professor, as well as the doyen among India, the scholars on Southeast Asia today. Professor Partha S. Ghosh, President and a dear friend, Professor Lipi Ghosh, Vice President and the Founder Secretary, and other senior officials of IAAPS, Dr. James Gomez, Regional Director, Asia Center, Bangkok, Professor Sonali Chakrabarti Banerjee, Honorable Vice Chancellor of University of Calcutta, my friends and colleagues, Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay and Ambassador Pinak Chakrabarti, distinguished panelists, participants, guests, members, and dear students, as well as members of a very widely spread audience. Greetings from the national capital. It's a great honor for me to have been invited to deliver the keynote address. I heard some really very interesting and important points today about this association, and it confirms my conviction that scholars, academics, people working in universities and think tanks, they all have a very important role to play in society and especially in the domain of policy making. So I strongly encourage and support such activities, and I have no doubt that given the trajectory that IAAPS has already covered, it has a very, very bright future. I also express deep appreciation for the rare blend of professionalism and enthusiasm that IAAPS has shown in terms of organizing this very challenging conference in a very difficult time. And therefore, I wish them and all of us a complete success for this conference. A quick word about the beach scene that you are seeing as my background. No, I'm not in Thailand or anywhere else in the Southeast Asia. This is my gimmick to make you all and also myself happy that we are in difficult times, but it is not going to let our spirits down. I must say also I'm most impressed by the rich selection of topics to be explored at this two-day conference. If the publication of the previous conference is any indicator, and we have seen the contents and the rest of it all, we can be completely confident that in the next 2 days, we would be having a very stimulating intellectual dialogue among scholars, both in India, in our neighborhood, and Southeast Asia and beyond. And therefore, I have a feeling that the rich haulage of knowledge that would appear as a result of all this will certainly have a great deal of relevance and value to the government. Now, as you know, it is said, when diplomats have nothing much to say, they can talk for a long time. And when they have something really consequential to say, they keep quiet. But this does not apply to me because I'm not a diplomat, I'm only a former diplomat. And yet I'm very conscious of the 15 minutes assigned to me, and I think I'm now left with 13 minutes. And I'm going to present essentially something for all of us to reflect on. I think in olden days, I know the inaugural addresses, they could go on for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe even 1 hour. But today, the challenge is to put across your perspective in a shortest possible time so that then we can quickly get on with the real business of this conference. And that is why I feel it is not necessary for me to go into the technicalities of the topic. Now, I think we need to remind ourselves that the topic today is very pertinent, and it is From Look East to Act East, Challenges and Opportunities in Contemporary India-Southeast Asia Relations. I think it would be good to remain restricted to this particular topic. Now, my own perceptions on this subject have been shaped by actual diplomatic experience of many years of having worked in Indonesia and Myanmar, travels across the region, the research experience that went into the making of my book on India-Myanmar relations, and a decade of exposure to the work of think tanks in India and abroad. So with this preface, let me present before you 5 broad points which are directly relevant to the topic that is going to be discussed by a variety of scholars today. First of all, how do we define the East? Is it Myanmar and Bangladesh, or Indochina, or Southeast Asia, or Asia Pacific, or now, more importantly, the Indo-Pacific? The point is that definitions change with time, and they bring their own implications, which are never very clear to the society at large, and that is where the scholars have a great role and responsibility to decipher them and then to make them intelligible in simple language to the public at large. Secondly, there is no doubt that there is consensus among scholars, both of India and the region, that approximately 7 phases were seen in India's relations with the East. For example, Professor S.D. Muni talks about this in his book. Others have also presented this in different forms. And those 7 phases, as you know very quickly, are ancient Hindu Buddhist influence, then the Islamic wave, then the British era, followed by the Nehru period, then the post-Nehru phase, and then we come to the contemporary period that we all remember by heart, the Look East policy era, and then the Act East policy era, which began in 2014. Now, these phases have to be assessed and reassessed. Every generation has to do that, because only then we can learn about the past and what it is teaching us. I think we can say with complete conviction that the present day relationship between India and Southeast Asia is substantial, it is multidimensional, it is better than in the past, but at the same time, it is still at the suboptimal level. That is the reason why conference organizers spoke about opportunities and challenges. So essentially, how do we look at this perspective, and how do we come up with some tangible, concrete ideas that could contribute to this relationship? Honestly speaking, if you are approaching students, you are approaching media, you are approaching governments, civil society, this is the question uppermost in their mind. If we have such a rich history, and if we are not satisfied with the present level of the relationship, then where is it lacking, and how we can raise the level, the range, the scope, and the impact of India's relations with Southeast Asia. My third point, dear friends, is that for this task to be performed satisfactorily, both the micro and the macro outlook will have to be adopted. It is actually indispensable. And it is in this context I come to one of the kernel or central points of my presentation. Developments in the past 1 year, starting from November 2019 to now, we are ending October 2020, have been of exceptional significance. Some of them are India's decision to exit from the negotiations for RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which has incidentally caused much disappointment in Southeast Asia. I think we must recognize that. Secondly, geopolitical shifts. Thirdly, China. And fourthly, the COVID's impact. I think these four and maybe other developments, they have introduced new dynamics in India-Southeast Asia relations. Can we say that a new phase is beginning or has begun, the 8th phase? Can we say that India's Act East policy is now turning into what may be described as India's Indo-Pacific policy? This is a question I'm raising. And if this is the case, what are the emerging implications and repercussions? And we will need to go into them very clearly. And if this is indeed the trend, then how do we blend it with our earlier aim to strengthen the India-ASEAN partnership? Because if the region is bigger, if it is stretching from Japan to eastern coast of Africa, does then the centrality of ASEAN still remain valid and intact? As an issue we must examine with a fresh perspective rather than keep adhering to what we have been reading and hearing, because what we are reading and hearing is based on somewhat dated perception, somewhat dated knowledge. My fourth point, dear friends, is that as we look at India-Southeast Asia relationship, we must factor in two other relevant elements. One is the vital importance of India's Northeast in this process. I think this is a major takeaway for our generation, especially in the past decade, that Northeast has come to occupy almost a central position in the India-Southeast Asia relations from all points of view. And therefore, I'm very happy that several scholars are going to touch this subject. And the second element is the growing importance, the strategic, economic, political importance of the Andaman Nicobar Islands and this emerging concept of the Bay of Bengal community. The Bay of Bengal community, which may take care of the security dimension, but which will focus especially on the development dimension with forward-looking ideas such as the optimal utilization of the potential of blue economy. So if we are talking about a new phase in the relationship, these two elements, in my humble suggestion, become elements of great importance. My final point, merely recalling the past or describing the characteristics of the present is not enough for us. It's important, it is essential, because without these two elements, we cannot understand and we cannot decipher the future. But we must also try to decipher the future, maybe not 25 years from now, but surely the next 5 or 10 years. It is doable, and it is a task which is a challenge to our collective intellectual imagination. These are extraordinary times. Humanity and nations face truly unprecedented challenges. They are so obvious that it is not necessary for us to define them at all. This very fact that we are sitting in our own homes or offices and creating together a new experience of an international conference is enough to confirm this point. Our scholar foreign minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, spoke recently, and I quote a very important sentence that he uttered there. He said, "The world will never be the same again." The world will never be the same again. He was speaking at the August meeting of the ASEAN India think tank networks. Totally relevant. I think those young students who have not seen this speech should revisit this speech, because this is where the minister said, we governments are looking for, and I quote again, new thinking, fresh ideas, more imagination, and greater openness, unquote. Dear friends, let these words, let these wise words be our inspiration. Let us, through our deliberations, show a fresh dimension and a new openness, so that people not merely in Delhi, but in all the 10 ASEAN capitals and beyond could understand that this conference hosted in Kolkata, the traditional seat of learning and knowledge on Southeast Asia, can unleash new trends of thinking. I thank you once again for your attention, for your courtesies, and I wish you all the best for this 10th conference of IAAPS. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, for an unexpectedly perceptive address, which will certainly inspire fresh thinking, especially among the younger scholars. Friends and colleagues, and some former students, ladies and gentlemen, my task presently is as unenviable, if not unviable, as it is unavoidable. After all, everything that needs to be said by me has already been succinctly put forward by renowned academics and diplomats. I may be perhaps pardoned for a somewhat bland repetition or reiteration of what you have heard before, but this often happens in any national or international conference. As I said earlier, it's a matter of pride and honor for me to chair the inaugural session of the 10th Biennial Conference of IAAPS. The theme of the conference, from Lucist to Actist, Challenges and Opportunities in Contemporary India, Southeast Asia Relations, is of course a well-chosen subject, attesting to the wisdom of the organizers. To begin with the Lucist policy, it was officially launched in the year 1991 during the tenure of the Indian Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. But the term Lucist significantly was mentioned for the first time in the annual report of the Ministry of External Affairs as late as 1996. This Lucist policy essentially represents, as you are all aware, a multi-pronged approach encompassing political, strategic, and economic aspects. Having realized ASEAN's strategic importance, India tried to use the ASEAN platform as a springboard for furthering successful integration with Asia. With regard to the expectations of India about the emergence of an Asian century, New Delhi intended to deal with Asian economic and security cooperation, keeping in mind not only the Asian powers such as China, Japan, South Korea, but also non-Asian powers such as Australia, USA, and Russia, which indicated a broad vision. While emphasizing regional integration, reform, and economic liberalization, the Locust policy stresses rapid economic growth and development of a strategic fund for India, that is, the northeastern region of the country. Undeniably, despite growing momentum in the 21st century, India's Locust policy has been facing, naturally, a number of challenges, which, as the IAAPS has rightly decided, demand deliberation by the learned scholars in this conference. The issues like economic ties through trade and commerce, connectivity under BIMSTEC or FOIP, and contemporary perspectives in India, Southeast Asia regions have therefore received due attention from the learned scholars in this conference. As to the Act East policy, it was devised by the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at a regional summit in Myanmar in 2014. Initially, this policy was framed for economic initiatives, but gradually it embraced geostrategic dimensions. The Actist policy is a sort of counterbalancing effort against Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific region. The three C's, connectivity, culture, and commerce, are the most pertinent aspects of this policy. The Actist policy not only relates to ASEAN, ASEAN plus 3, ASEAN Regional Forum, or East Asia Summit, but also covers sub-regional organizations like the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, or BIMSTEC for short, and Mekong-Ganga Cooperation. Connectivity in all its forms, physical, institutional, and psychological, remain the enduring agenda of the India-ASEAN engagement. India has been in the forefront of pushing a host of transnational projects that seek to weave the region together in an intricate web of road, rail, and maritime links. The current Indian government focuses with renewed vigor on the economic uplift of India's northeastern states as the gateway to ASEAN. Therefore, enhanced connectivity indeed promises to unleash a new prosperity in the entire region. Culture and creative pursuits provide the mental and spiritual foundation for growing international engagement. Known in ancient times as Suvarnabhumi, the land of gold, Southeast Asia bears a deep impress of the Indian culture. Ramayana and Mahabharata are not just Indian epics, but civilizational memories which India shares with many Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia, Thailand, and Cambodia. Buddhism again forms a spiritual bond of India ASEAN relations as Buddhists from all over the region flock to India for pilgrimage and visit to shrines at Bodh Gaya, Sarnath, Rajgir, and Nalanda. In terms of commerce, India ASEAN trade and investment relations have been growing steadily, with ASEAN being India's fourth largest trading partner. India's trade with ASEAN stands at approximately 10.6% of India's overall trade. Investment flows are also substantial both ways, with ASEAN accounting for approximately 18.28% of investment flows into India since the year 2000. The ASEAN India Free Trade Area was born in July 2015, and trade with ASEAN in the foreseeable future is expected to reach the magnificent figure of 200, no, I'm sorry, it's $300 billion. So, if we take all these together, it means intertwining the collective dreams of about 1.8 billion people. Doing this, India and friendly Southeast Asian countries are set to expand an arc of prosperity across the region and script a new narrative of an Asian renaissance. The urgency of this new narrative is manifest from the growing belligerence of the most powerful country in Asia, that is China. Unfortunately, this country is in various modes of confrontation with more than a score of its neighbors, including India. China is as bellicose in the mountains as in the seas. India is in daily confrontation with China in the mountains, and due to its unique geographical situation, cannot shy away from China's depredations in the seas, which adversely affect a number of Southeast Asian countries friendly to India. The behavior of China has been taking such an unacceptable turn that just a week before the presidential elections in the country, the United States Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense rushed to India to sign a new agreement on exchange and cooperation, the fourth in a series since 2016. In this way, freedom loving countries like India and America reinforce their solidarity at a time when the authoritarian regime of China is bent upon threatening freedom here and there. In view of this fast changing situation, the responsibility of the forthcoming 11th Biennial Conference of IAAPS is destined to be much more significant than that of the present 10th conference. Obviously, an academic body cannot directly contribute to security and cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region, but it can certainly create an environment conducive to the pursuit of these goals by political leaders in concerned countries. Lastly, I have to stress what can profoundly be realized only by institution builders like Lippi Ghosh, and let me also flatter myself. I was the founder, director of the Department of South and Southeast Asian Studies, Calcutta University, which Lippi Ghosh subsequently strengthened during her directorship, and there were others too making vital contributions. It is extremely difficult to build an institution even on a national scale. In fact, we can't go into pathetic and hilarious incidents of resistance to the formation and sustenance of such an institution by teachers as well as clerks in a university. Much less so, fortunately, in the government. But we can't go into that. Infinitely more tough it is to build an institution on an international scale, as IAAPS has demonstrated by attracting more than 90 participants in pandemic times. But this has a rider. When a student soars higher and higher, the expectations of a teacher like me grow greater and greater. I'm quite sure about the ability of Lippi and her colleagues to fulfill my expectations in the years ahead. This is the point where I may conclude and stop, thanking all of you wholeheartedly. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, sir. Before we go for the formal vote of thanks, may I request our sir, Professor Jayantu Kumar Roy, to release our last year book, that is Perspective Asia Pacific. Sir, kindly hold the book before the camera so that, yes, this is the book. It is a collection of essays presented at our 9th Biennial International Conference in Chandigarh. Let us give a clap at least on this. Yes.
You may see the book without seeing my face, doesn't matter.
No, perfect, sir. It is absolutely perfect. So it is a pleasure, and whoever joined us in deliver.
see, I cannot invite Nandini to deliver the vote of thanks because it is a truncated inaugural address. Because you have said that there will be an address by Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhyay at 1 p.m.